They called me a thief in front of everyone I'd ever helped. They destroyed my reputation with lies, took away the one thing that gave my life meaning, and thought they'd seen the last of me. But what my cousins didn't know was that the poor relation they just humiliated had more money than they'd ever see in their lifetimes. And I was about to become the answer to their prayers and their worst nightmare all at once. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. The spring fundraiser at the Hartwell Family Foundation was supposed to be my proudest moment. I'd spent 3 months organizing it, reaching out to every contact I'd made in 15 years of volunteering. The grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers, and 200 guests in evening wear mingled over champagne and canapes. I wore my best dress, a simple navy blue number I'd found at a consignment shop, and my worn but polished shoes. I should have known something was wrong when my cousin Paul took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as slippery, "before we continue with tonight's celebrations, the board has an unfortunate announcement to make." My stomach dropped. I was standing near the silent auction table, and I felt every eye in the room begin to turn toward me. "It has come to our attention," Paul continued, his face arranged in an expression of pained regret, "that there have been irregularities in the foundation's accounts. Specifically, $5,000 has gone missing from the emergency relief fund." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I felt my face go hot. "After a thorough internal investigation," Paul said, and I saw my cousin Nina step up beside him, her face cold and satisfied, "we've determined that Clara Jenkins," he pointed directly at me, "has been embezzling from the foundation she claimed to serve." The room exploded in whispers. I stood frozen, my mouth open, unable to form words. "That's not true," I finally managed to shout, but my voice was drowned out by the noise. Nina stepped forward with a folder in her hands. "We have bank statements showing deposits into Clara's account that match the missing amounts. We have forged requisition forms with her signature, and we have testimony from our accountant." I started, but Paul cut me off. "Clara, please don't make this worse than it already is," he said, his voice now gentle, almost pitying. "We know you've struggled financially. We understand that desperation can make people do things they normally wouldn't. We're willing not to press charges if you leave quietly and agree never to return." I looked around the room at faces I'd known for years. Some looked away. Some stared with disgust. Not one person stepped forward to defend me. Not even Maggie Chen, my best friend of 40 years, who stood near the back with tears in her eyes but her mouth firmly closed. "I didn't steal anything," I said, my voice shaking now both with fear and rage. "Paul, Nina, you know I would never." "Security," Nina called out, and 2 men in dark suits appeared at my elbows. They escorted me out through the ballroom, past the silent auction tables I'd arranged, past the flower arrangements I'd spent hours choosing, past the donation boxes I'd placed so carefully. Everyone watched. No one spoke up. As the hotel doors closed behind me, I heard the music start up again inside. The party continued without me, as if I'd never existed at all. I stood on the sidewalk in my consignment shop dress, my worn shoes, and my shattered dignity. I was 64 years old, and in the space of 10 minutes, I'd lost my purpose, my community, and my good name. What Paul and Nina didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 3 years earlier, I'd won $8.7 million in the state lottery. I'd told no one. I'd kept living in my modest apartment, kept volunteering, kept being the poor relation. They all pitied. I'd wanted to see what people were really made of when they thought I had nothing to offer but my time and my heart. Now I knew. As I walked to the bus stop, still shaking with shock and humiliation, a plan began forming in my mind. It would take patience, it would take careful strategy, but I had something they didn't have. I had time, I had money, and I had absolutely nothing left to lose. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't bear the thought of sitting alone in my apartment, replaying the humiliation over and over. Instead, I took a taxi, a luxury I rarely allowed myself even with millions in the bank, to a small hotel on the outskirts of town. In the sterile quiet of that hotel room, I finally let myself cry. Not just for what had happened that night, but for all the years I'd spent trying to earn the respect of people who would never give it. For the loneliness of carrying a secret so big it had isolated me from everyone I knew. For the friendship with Maggie that had just died without a single word spoken in my defense. But by morning, the tears had dried, and something harder had taken their place. I checked out of the hotel and went home to my little apartment. It looked exactly as I'd left it. The thrift store furniture, the secondhand books, the carefully budgeted life I'd constructed. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. My lottery winnings sat in 3 separate accounts, managed by a discreet financial advisor in the city who knew me only as Client 847. Over 3 years, those millions had grown to nearly 11 million through careful, conservative investments. I'd been living off my Social Security and a small pension, letting the fortune accumulate, waiting for the right moment to do something meaningful with it. I'd imagined that moment would be working alongside my family, showing them through example how to give selflessly. I'd imagined teaching Nina's children about charity, about thinking beyond yourself. I'd been naive enough to think my example mattered. Now I had a different plan. I spent the next week in my apartment, barely sleeping, researching and planning. I learned everything I could about the Hartwell Family Foundation's finances. Thanks to my 15 years of volunteering, I knew which board members to trust and which ones were just there for the social prestige. I knew which programs were struggling and which ones were thriving. More importantly, I knew that the foundation was in trouble. Nina and Paul had been skimming from the administrative budget for years, funding their lavish lifestyles while the actual charitable programs suffered. They'd framed me not because they needed a scapegoat, but because I'd started asking questions about discrepancies I'd noticed. They'd struck first, removing the one person who might expose them. On the 8th day after the fundraiser, I received a letter from the foundation's board. It formally terminated my volunteer position and banned me from all foundation events and properties. It was signed by Paul as board president and Nina as vice president. At the bottom, in smaller print, was Maggie's signature as executive director. That hurt more than all the rest combined. I sat with that letter for a long time, feeling the weight of it. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a new file folder I'd labeled Evidence. The next day, I made an appointment with a different lawyer, not the foundation's attorney, but someone with no connection to my family. His name was James Morrison, and he specialized in nonprofit law and fraud cases. Ms. Jenkins, he said after I'd explained everything. If what you're telling me is true, your cousins have committed serious crimes. We could pursue criminal charges. I don't want that, I said. Not yet, anyway. What I want is to help the foundation despite them. And when the time is right, I want to expose what they've done. But on my terms. He studied me for a long moment. What exactly did you have in mind? I told him. His eyebrows rose higher and higher as I spoke. That's quite an undertaking, he finally said. And you have the resources to pull this off. I handed him a bank statement. He whistled low. Ms. Jenkins, I think you might be the most interesting client I've ever had. Over the next month, we set everything in motion. I established a new corporation, a charitable trust with ironclad anonymity protections. Mr. Morrison handled all the paperwork, ensuring that no paper trail would lead back to me. The trust was called simply the Phoenix Foundation, and its mission was to support struggling nonprofits with emergency funding. The Hartwell Family Foundation would be its first recipient. I also hired a private investigator. Her name was Susan Teller, and she came highly recommended for her discretion and her skill at financial forensics. I gave her everything I knew about Paul and Nina's activities and asked her to find proof. This might take a while, she warned me. People who are good at hiding money are usually very careful. I have time, I said. While Susan worked, I began my transformation. I'd spent 3 years hiding my wealth, dressing down, living small. Now I needed to become someone else entirely. Someone my family wouldn't recognize if they passed me on the street. I hired a personal stylist. I joined a gym and started working with a trainer. I went to a high-end salon and had my gray hair professionally colored and cut into a sleek silver bob. I bought clothes that actually fit, that were elegant and expensive. I learned to walk in heels that didn't come from a discount store. Every morning, I looked in the mirror and saw someone new emerging. Someone who'd been hiding under dowdy clothes and self-imposed poverty. Someone who was done being invisible. Maggie called once 3 weeks after the fundraiser. I let it go to voicemail. Clara, it's me. Her voice said, thick with emotion. I need to talk to you. Please call me back. I'm so sorry I didn't. Please. Just call me. I saved the message but didn't return the call. I wasn't ready yet. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too sharp. 2 months after the fundraiser, Susan called with her first report. You were right, she said. I've found evidence of systematic embezzlement going back 7 years. Paul and Nina have taken at least $200,000 from the foundation. They've been very clever about it, small amounts, spread out, hidden in legitimate-looking expenses. But it's there. Can you prove it in court? I asked. Absolutely. I have bank records, receipts, everything. But Clara, there's more. The foundation is in serious financial trouble. They're running out of money fast. Within 6 months, they'll have to start closing programs. Within a year, they might have to shut down entirely. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Perfect, I said. Let them sweat for a little while longer. Then we'll introduce them to their guardian angel. 3 months after the fundraiser, the Hartwell Family Foundation received an unexpected letter. It arrived via certified mail addressed to the board of directors sent from a law firm in the city. I know because Mr. Morrison sent me a copy. The letter was brief and professional. It introduced the Phoenix Foundation as a charitable organization dedicated to supporting nonprofit work. It noted that the Hartwell Family Foundation had been selected for a substantial grant, $50,000, to be used for operational expenses and program development. The only requirement was a quarterly financial report to ensure the funds were being used appropriately. The letter was signed by Mr. Morrison as legal counsel for the Phoenix Foundation. There was no mention of me anywhere. Mr. Morrison called me the day after the letter was sent. "They've already responded," he said, and I could hear the amusement in his voice. "I've never seen a board move so fast. They're falling over themselves with gratitude." "Good," I said. "Let them get comfortable. We're just getting started." Over the next 6 months, I became the foundation's silent savior. Every time they faced a crisis, a program about to close, a facility in need of repairs, a budget shortfall, the Phoenix Foundation appeared with exactly the amount they needed. Not too much to make them suspicious, but always enough to keep them afloat. I watched from a distance as Paul and Nina took credit for securing these mysterious grants. They told the board they had connections with the Phoenix Foundation. They implied that their networking and fundraising skills had attracted this generous anonymous donor. They preened and postured while my money kept their sinking ship from going under. It was almost funny. But I wasn't just throwing money at the problem. I was strategic. Each grant came with requirements: financial transparency, board oversight, program evaluations. Mr. Morrison drafted the terms carefully, building in accountability measures that Paul and Nina couldn't refuse without losing the funding they desperately needed. Slowly, the foundation's practices began to change. Thomas Reed, the young board member who'd always seemed uncomfortable with Paul and Nina's leadership, used the Phoenix Foundation's requirements to push for reforms. Other board members, emboldened by the new funding and the accountability measures, started asking harder questions. Paul and Nina fought back, but carefully. They couldn't risk losing their anonymous benefactor. I followed all of this through Mr. Morrison's reports and through my own discreet observations. I'd started attending foundation events again, not as Clara Jenkins, the disgraced volunteer, but as an anonymous donor at public fundraisers, always in the back, always leaving early, always wearing different wigs and glasses and styles. I watched my former colleagues work. I listened to the whispers. No one recognized me. It was remarkable how invisible you could be when you were well-dressed and confident. When I'd been poor Clara, everyone had noticed me because I'd been useful. Now that I looked like I belonged in their world, I might as well have been furniture. 6 months into my campaign, I finally returned Maggie's call. We met at a small coffee shop far from our usual neighborhood. She arrived first and stood when she saw me, her eyes widening. "Clara," she whispered, "is that really you?" I'd forgotten she wouldn't recognize me right away. My silver hair, my tailored clothes, my new glasses. I looked like a different person. "It's me," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. "You look amazing," she said. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for months." "Clara, I'm so sorry. I should have spoken up that night. I should have defended you. I was just so shocked, and Paul was so convincing. You believed them," I said quietly. She flinched. "No, I didn't. Not really. But I was scared. Paul and Nina control the foundation, and if I'd spoken up, they would have fired me. I have a mortgage, Clara. I have bills. I was a coward, and I've hated myself every day since." I wanted to be angry. I'd spent months nursing that anger, feeding it, letting it fuel my plans. But looking at Maggie now, seeing the genuine remorse in her eyes, I felt something else. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding. "I didn't steal anything," I said. "I know. Thomas Reed has been investigating. He never believed it either." "Clara, Paul and Nina framed you. We're almost certain of it. Thomas has found discrepancies in the accounts, things that don't add up. He's building a case, but it's slow going because Paul and Nina control access to most of the records." "Tell him to keep looking," I said, "and tell him to pay special attention to the administrative expenses from the last 7 years. Maggie's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about that?" "Let's just say I've had time to do some research," I said. "Maggie, something else. Do you know anything about the Phoenix Foundation?" Her face lit up. "Oh yes! They've been incredible. They've saved us honestly. The grants they've given us have kept us from closing 3 different programs. Nobody knows who's behind it. Paul and Nina claim they have connections, but I don't believe them. They're just as mystified as the rest of us." I smiled. "What if I told you that I know who the Phoenix Foundation is?" She leaned forward. "You do?" "I am," I said simply. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that she quickly muffled with her hand. "You? But how? Clara, where did you get that kind of money?" I told her about the lottery. About the 3 years of living in secret wealth. About watching and waiting and hoping to see the best in people. About being disappointed and hurt and, finally, determined. When I finished, she was crying. "You could have helped yourself," she said. "You could have moved away, lived well, forgotten about all of us. Why did you keep giving to the foundation? After what they did to you?" "Because the foundation helps people who have nothing to do with Paul and Nina's greed," I said. "Because there are programs that feed hungry children and house homeless veterans and provide scholarships to kids who would never get a chance otherwise. I wasn't going to let those programs die because my cousins are thieves." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to the annual gala," I said, "the one next month. And I'm going to reveal who the Phoenix Foundation really is. But first, I need your help." I told her the plan. Her eyes grew wider with each detail. "Clara Jenkins," she finally said, "you are absolutely terrifying." "Good," I said. "It's about time someone was afraid of me." The annual Hartwell Family Foundation Gala was exactly 1 month away. It would be held at the same Riverside hotel where I'd been humiliated, in the same grand ballroom where my reputation had been destroyed. This time 300 guests would attend instead of 200. The foundation's growing success, funded entirely by my anonymous donations, had attracted more supporters than ever before. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent those 4 weeks preparing like a general planning a battle. Every detail mattered. Every contingency had to be considered. Mr. Morrison secured my invitation through a shell corporation I'd established, Riverside Holdings LC, a potential major donor, interested in the foundation's work. The invitation came with a VP table near the stage, purchased for $10,000. Paul himself had called to thank the mysterious Mr. Chen of Riverside Holdings for his generous support. He was practically groveling, Mr. Morrison reported with barely concealed glee. "I think he's hoping to cultivate this relationship. He has no idea he's been talking to your lawyer." Susan Teller, my private investigator, delivered her final report 2 weeks before the gala. She'd compiled everything, 7 years of financial records, emails between Paul and Nina discussing how to hide their theft, bank statements showing the stolen money flowing into their personal accounts, and the forged documents they'd used to frame me. "This is airtight," she said, handing me a thick folder. "With this evidence they could both face criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. We're talking serious prison time if the DA decides to prosecute." I held the folder, feeling its weight. This was power. This was justice. But it wasn't revenge. Not exactly. Revenge would have meant going straight to the police, destroying them completely, watching them hauled away in handcuffs. What I wanted was something more complicated. I wanted them to face what they'd done. I wanted them to understand the harm they'd caused. And I wanted them to choose freely, publicly, to do better. Maybe that made me naive. Or maybe it just meant I was still Clara Jenkins underneath all the new clothes and silver hair. Thomas Reed reached out through Maggie 3 days before the gala. Could he meet with me? He had information about my case, and he wanted to help. We met at the same coffee shop where I'd reconciled with Maggie. Thomas was younger than I'd realized, 45 at most, with prematurely gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd joined the foundation board 5 years ago after his mother died of cancer in a facility the foundation supported. "Mems Jenkins," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I owe you an apology. I should have spoken up that night. I suspected Paul and Nina were lying, but I didn't have proof and I failed you." "You're not the only one," I said, but without bitterness. I was tired of carrying that particular weight. "I've been investigating them," he said, pulling out his own folder. "I've found evidence of embezzlement. I was planning to present it to the board after the gala. But Maggie said you have information too." I showed him Susan's report. He read through it, his expression growing darker with each page. "My God," he finally said. "This is even worse than I thought. Clara, we need to take this to the police." "We will," I said. "But not yet. First I want to give them a chance." "A chance to do what?" "Run? Chance to make it right," I said. "Thomas, what they did to me was terrible. But what they've done to the foundation, to the people we're supposed to help, that's worse. If we just have them arrested, the foundation will be caught up in scandal. Donations will dry up. Programs will close. The people who need help will suffer. So what do you suggest?" I told him about the Phoenix Foundation, about my plan for the gala, about the ultimatum I intended to deliver. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That's either brilliant or completely insane," he finally said. "Maybe both." "Will you support me?" I asked. "I need the board's backing if this is going to work." "You have it," he said. "And Clara, I'm glad you're coming back. The foundation has missed you. I've missed you. Even though we never really knew each other before." The night before the gala, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror in my apartment. My gown hung on the closet door. A stunning silver, gray silk that had cost more than 3 months of my old clothing budget. My shoes were elegant heels that actually fit. My jewelry was simple but real. I looked like someone who belonged at a charity gala. Someone with money and confidence and power. But underneath, I was still the same Clara who'd been escorted out in disgrace, still the woman who'd cried in a hotel room and eaten ramen for dinner while sitting on millions. Still the lonely person who'd won the lottery and had no one to tell. Tomorrow, I said to my reflection, you stop hiding. I'd spent 3 years hiding my wealth to test people's character. I'd spent 6 months hiding my identity to save a foundation that had rejected me. Tomorrow, I would stop hiding everything. Whatever happened next, whether Paul and Nina chose redemption or destruction, whether the board supported me or turned away, whether Maggie and I could truly repair our friendship, it would all happen in the light. I was done with secrets. I was done being invisible. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Morrison. I'm ready, I said. Let's make sure everything is in place. Already done, he said. The audiovisual team will be there early to set up the presentation. The documentation is prepared. Your speech is loaded into the teleprompter, though I still think you should memorize it. I've memorized it, I said. I've been rehearsing it for 6 months. How are you feeling? I thought about that. Nervous, certainly. Anxious about how the night would unfold. But also something else. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hopeful, I said finally. Is that strange? After everything they put you through. Maybe a little, he admitted. But I think it's also very you, Clara. You're one of the most genuinely good people I've ever met. Even your revenge is kind. It's not revenge, I said. It's justice. There's a difference? Is there? Revenge is about making them hurt. Justice is about making things right. I want the foundation to survive and thrive. I want the people we help to keep getting help. If Paul and Nina learn something and become better people, that's a bonus. If they don't, well, then I'll pursue the criminal charges. Fair enough, he said. Get some sleep, Clara. Tomorrow is going to be quite a day. But I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed, watching the shadows move across my ceiling, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The lottery ticket I'd bought on a whim. The secret I'd kept for 3 years. The humiliation that had changed everything. The long, patient months of planning. Tomorrow, one way or another, it would all come together. I thought about what I would say when I stepped onto that stage. How I would look Paul and Nina in the eyes and show them who I really was. What they'd thrown away when they chose greed over integrity. And I thought about forgiveness. Real forgiveness. Not the cheap kind where you just say the words. The kind that costs something. The kind that requires the other person to earn it. I didn't know if I could offer that yet. But I was willing to try. The sun rose on the day of the gala, and I rose with it. I had 12 hours to get ready. I had 12 hours before everything changed. The Riverside Hotel looked exactly as I remembered it, except this time I arrived in a hired car instead of taking the bus. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out onto the red carpet in my silver, gray gown and elegant heels, looking like I belonged. Because tonight, I did belong. The grand ballroom sparkled with even more extravagance than the fundraiser where I'd been disgraced. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across white linen tablecloths. Ice sculptures shaped like phoenixes, how fitting, graced the buffet tables. A string quartet played softly in the corner. 300 guests in evening wear circulated with champagne flutes, their jewelry catching the light. I'd arrived deliberately late, after most guests were already inside. I wanted to make an entrance, but more importantly I wanted Paul and Nina to be too busy with hosting duties to pay attention to one more wealthy donor arriving. At the entrance, I gave my name to the volunteer checking tickets. Grace Chen, Riverside Holdings, I said smoothly. It was the alias Mr. Morrison and I had chosen. Close enough to my lawyer's fake identity that the paperwork would match, but common enough not to draw attention. The volunteer, a young woman I didn't recognize, checked her list and smiled. Of course, Miss Chen. You're at table 3 right near the stage. Thank you so much for your generous support. I smiled and moved into the ballroom. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I'd practiced this moment 100 times in my mirror at home. The first person I saw was Maggie. She stood near the silent auction tables, and our eyes met across the room. She gave me the tiniest nod of acknowledgement, then deliberately looked away. We'd agreed. No recognition, no interaction until the reveal. She couldn't afford to give anything away. I spotted Thomas Reed next, standing with a small group of board members. He saw me but showed no reaction beyond a slight shift in his posture. Good, he was ready. Then I saw them. Paul stood near the stage in an expensive tuxedo, his silver hair swept back, his smile wide and politician, bright as he greeted guests. He looked prosperous and confident, every inch the successful board president. Nina worked the room in a red gown that probably cost $5,000, her jewelry gleaming, her laugh carrying across the ballroom. She'd always loved being the center of attention, loved playing the role of the philanthropic society woman. They'd built their reputations on stolen money and lies. Tonight that would end. I made my way to table 3, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. The other guests at my table were wealthy donors I'd never met, a retired doctor and his wife, a tech entrepreneur, a real estate investor. They introduced themselves politely, and I played my role as Grace Chen, a private investor interested in charitable work. Have you worked with the foundation before? The doctor's wife asked. Not directly, I said, but I've been watching their work for some time. I'm very impressed with how they've grown this past year. Oh yes, the real estate investor said. They've had remarkable success. I heard they received several substantial anonymous grants. Very mysterious benefactor, apparently. They're supposed to announce who it is tonight. Really? I said, taking a sip of champagne. How exciting. Across the room, Paul was moving toward the stage. The program would start soon. Welcome remarks, dinner, the silent auction results, and then the main event, the announcement of the Phoenix Foundation's identity and a major donation pledge. That was when I would step forward. My phone buzzed in my evening bag. A text from Mr. Morrison. AV team confirms everything is ready. Presentation loaded. Good luck. I sent back a simple thumbs up emoji. The lights dimmed slightly and Paul's voice boomed through the sound system. Good evening, everyone. If you could please find your seats, we're about to begin. The 300 guests settled into their chairs. I sat straight, backed at table 3, my hands folded in my lap, breathing slowly and steadily. Not yet, not yet. Paul launched into his welcome speech, thanking everyone for coming, praising the foundation's work, taking credit for the organization's recent growth and success. He mentioned the strategic partnerships he'd formed, the innovative fundraising he'd pioneered, the vision and leadership that had brought them through challenging times. He didn't mention that the challenging times had been caused by his theft, or that the strategic partnerships were actually just me, anonymously, keeping them from bankruptcy. Nina took the microphone next, her voice honey, sweet as she talked about the programs they'd funded, the lives they'd changed. She told a touching story about a veteran who'd found housing through one of their initiatives, a program that had almost closed until the Phoenix Foundation's grant saved it. We're so grateful to our anonymous benefactor, she said, her hand over her heart. Tonight, we're honored to finally reveal their identity and announce a historic new partnership. My hands tightened in my lap. Almost time. Dinner was served, an elegant meal of herb-crusted salmon and roasted vegetables that I barely tasted. I made small talk with my tablemates, watching the room, waiting for my moment. Paul returned to the stage after dinner. And now, he said, his voice rich with anticipation, the moment you've all been waiting for. For the past 9 months, the Hartwell Family Foundation has been blessed by the generosity of an anonymous donor. The Phoenix Foundation has provided crucial funding that has allowed us to expand our programs, reach more people in need, and secure our future. He paused dramatically. Tonight, that anonymous benefactor has agreed to step forward and announce a 5-year commitment that will transform everything we do. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce. He looked toward the back of the room, clearly expecting someone to enter from there. Instead, I stood up at table 3. That would be me, I said clearly. Every head in the room turned. Paul's mouth fell open. Nina's face went white, then red. Paul said, his voice suddenly uncertain. What are you? You're not supposed to be here. I'm a paying guest, I said calmly, walking toward the stage. My heels clicked on the polished floor. I purchased a VP table under the name Grace Chen. Perhaps you remember the donation, $10,000. Thomas Reed stood up from his table. Let her speak, he said loudly. She has every right to be here. Other board members shifted uncomfortably. Some guests whispered. The string quartet had stopped playing. I reached the stage and climbed the steps. Paul moved as if to block me, but Thomas appeared at his elbow, his hand on Paul's arm, stopping him. Clara Jenkins, Nina said, her voice shaking with rage, has been banned from this foundation. She's a thief. She was caught embezzling. I never stole a single penny, I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. I turned to face the audience. 300 faces stared back at me, some confused, some shocked, some beginning to look intrigued. But I am the Phoenix Foundation. Every grant you've received in the past 9 months came from me. The whispers exploded into full conversation. Paul grabbed my arm. That's insane. You're just trying to— Mr. Morrison, I called out. The presentation, please. The lights dimmed further, and the large screen behind the stage lit up. Mr. Morrison appeared from the audiovisual booth, a remote control in his hand. On the screen appeared bank records, wire transfers, all from my accounts through the Phoenix Foundation to the Hartwell Family Foundation. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. All documented, all traceable. The room fell silent again. 9 months ago, I said, my voice steady now, I was publicly accused of embezzlement at this foundation's spring fundraiser. I was escorted out by security, my reputation was destroyed, my volunteer work, 15 years of service, was erased. And not one person spoke up for me. I saw several people in the audience look down, uncomfortable. What Paul and Nina didn't know, I continued, was that 3 years ago I won $8.7 million in the lottery. I never told anyone. I kept living simply because I wanted to see what people were really like when they thought I had nothing to offer but my time and my heart. Nina had gone completely still, her face frozen. After I was publicly humiliated, I said, I did what they wanted. I disappeared. But I didn't give up on the foundation. I watched from a distance. I saw the program struggling. I saw the financial crisis developing. And I decided to help, anonymously. This is ridiculous, Paul said, but his voice lacked conviction. You expect us to believe? Mr. Morrison. The next slide, please. The screen changed. Now it showed different bank records. 7 years of financial documentation. Transfers from the foundation accounts to Paul and Nina's personal accounts. The evidence Susan Teller had compiled. The proof of their embezzlement. Nina made a small sound, almost like a whimper. While I was saving the foundation, I said, my voice harder now, Paul and Nina were stealing from it. $200,000 over 7 years. Hidden in fake expenses, forged receipts, creative accounting. They framed me for theft to cover their own crimes and to silence me before I could expose them. The room erupted. Guests stood pointing, talking. Some board members rushed toward Paul and Nina. Others pulled out their phones. Paul's face had gone from red to gray. We can explain. You have a choice, I said, cutting through the noise. My voice rang out clear and strong. You can make this right, or you can face criminal prosecution. I have all the evidence. My lawyer has copies. So does Thomas Reed. So does the district attorney's office. They'll receive everything first thing Monday morning, unless you do exactly what I'm about to tell you. The ballroom had descended into chaos. 300 guests were on their feet, some shouting questions, others frantically whispering to each other. Camera phones were out everywhere. This moment was being recorded, shared, broadcast to the world in real time. Paul stood frozen at the edge of the stage, his face ashen. Nina had sunk into a chair, her red gown pooling around her like spilled wine, her perfectly made-up face streaked with tears. Quiet, please. Thomas Reed's voice boomed through the sound system. He'd taken control of the microphone. Everyone, please. Let Clara finish. The noise subsided to a dull murmur. I took a breath and continued. Here's what's going to happen, I said, looking directly at Paul and Nina. First, you're going to stand up here, in front of all these witnesses, and you're going to tell the truth. You're going to admit that you framed me. You're going to admit that you stole from this foundation. And you're going to apologize, not just to me, but to every person who depends on the programs your greed almost destroyed. Paul's jaw tightened. And if we refuse, then these documents go to the district attorney Monday morning, I said simply. You'll be arrested. You'll be charged with embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and making false accusations. You'll likely go to prison. And the foundation will be dragged through a scandal that will destroy donations for years. The programs will close. The people we help will suffer. I let that sink in, then continued. Second, you will both resign from the board immediately. You will have no further role in any decision-making for this foundation. Third, you will repay every penny you stole, not to me, but to the foundation. You have 30 days? That's $200,000! Nina cried out. We don't have. Then sell your vacation home, I said coldly. Sell your cars. Sell your jewelry. Liquidate your investments. I don't care how you do it. You took that money from people who needed it. Now you're going to give it back. I turned to address the full ballroom. Fourth, the foundation will implement immediate reforms, full financial transparency, independent audits, a new board structure with oversight from outside the family. Thomas Reed will chair an ethics committee, and Maggie Chen will be given full authority as executive director, with the power to make operational decisions without board interference. Maggie, still standing near the silent auction tables, looked up in shock. I met her eyes and nodded. She'd earned this. She'd admitted her mistake. She'd worked to make it right. She deserved to lead. And finally, I said, turning back to Paul and Nina, the Phoenix Foundation will continue supporting this organization, but with one condition: you must prove you've changed. The foundation will receive progress reports every quarter. If I see evidence that you're genuinely committed to reform, to helping rather than stealing, to putting the mission before your egos, then the money continues. If not, the funding stops and the evidence goes to the DA, your choice. The ballroom was completely silent now. Everyone was staring at the stage, at the three of us. Me in my silver gown, Paul in his tuxedo looking like he might be sick, Nina crying in her chair. This is blackmail, Paul said weakly. No, I said. This is mercy. Blackmail would be demanding money for my silence. I'm offering you a chance to make amends, to do better, to become the people you've always pretended to be. Most people don't get that chance. Most people who commit the crimes you've committed just go to prison. I'm giving you an opportunity to choose redemption. Why? Nina asked, her voice broken. After what we did to you, why would you give us a chance? I thought about that question. I'd been asking it myself for months. Why not just destroy them? Why offer mercy to people who'd shown me none? Because I'm not doing this for you, I said finally. I'm doing it for everyone else. For the children who get meals through our programs. For the veterans who find housing. For the families who receive scholarships. They don't deserve to suffer because you made terrible choices. And maybe, just maybe, if you have to face what you've done and actively work to repair it, you'll become better people. That would be worth more than revenge. I looked out at the audience. I saw understanding on some faces, skepticism on others. I saw Maggie crying quietly. I saw Thomas nodding slowly, but make no mistake. I added, my voice hardening. This is a one-time offer. You get one chance to make this right. If you violate any part of this agreement, if you try to hide money or deceive anyone or harm this foundation in any way, I will end you. The evidence will go to the DA. You will face every consequence the law allows. Am I clear? Paul and Nina looked at each other. I could see the calculation in their eyes, the weighing of options. Prison or humiliation, criminal records or public shame. Loss of freedom or loss of pride. We need time to think, Paul said. No, I said. You don't. You have 30 seconds to decide, starting now. I looked at my watch. The ballroom waited in breathless silence. 20 seconds passed. Then 25. At 28 seconds, Nina stood up. She walked to the microphone on shaking legs. Her mascara had run, her perfect appearance shattered. I did it, she said, her voice barely audible. We did it. Everything Clara said is true. We stole from the foundation. We framed her to cover our theft and to get rid of her because she was starting to ask questions we couldn't answer. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Clara, I'm so sorry. I was jealous of you, of how much people respected you, of how you gave so freely while I always held back. I wanted what you had, but I wanted it without earning it. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry for what I've done to this foundation. I'll do whatever you ask. I'll pay back the money. I'll resign. I'll do better. Paul still stood silent, his face unreadable. Paul, I said quietly. He looked at me for a long moment. Then slowly he walked to the microphone beside Nina. I'm sorry too, he said, and his voice was hollow, defeated. Claire's right about everything I stole. I lied. I destroyed her reputation to save my own. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. I'll resign. I'll repay the money. His voice cracked. I'll try to be better. The ballroom erupted again, but this time it was different. There was still shock, still scandal, but also something else. Relief, maybe. Or hope that something broken might actually be fixed. I stepped forward to the microphone one last time. Thank you, I said to Paul and Nina, and I meant it. That took courage. Now comes the hard part. Proving you meant it. I turned to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting your evening. But I want you to know that the Hartwell Family Foundation is going to survive this. It's going to become stronger, more transparent, more dedicated to its mission than ever before. The Phoenix Foundation is committing $5 million over the next 5 years to support this work. But only if we all commit to doing it right. To honoring the people we serve by serving them honorably. Applause started somewhere in the back of the room. It spread, growing louder, until 300 people were on their feet clapping. Some were clapping for me. Some were clapping for the foundation. Some, I think, were just clapping because they didn't know what else to do after witnessing what they just witnessed. I stepped down from the stage. My legs were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Maggie rushed forward and caught me in a fierce hug. You did it, she whispered. Clara, you actually did it. We did it, I corrected her. Thomas, Mr. Morrison, we all did it. Thomas appeared beside us, grinning widely. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Clara Jenkins, you are a force of nature. Paul and Nina had been surrounded by board members and guests, some angry, some demanding answers, some, surprisingly, offering support. Security guards hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene. I saw Paul look over at me across the crowd. Our eyes met. He nodded once, not quite acknowledgement, not quite gratitude, but something. Perhaps the beginning of understanding. Mr. Morrison materialized at my elbow. The press is already calling, he said quietly. This is going to be everywhere by morning. Local news, national news, probably social media. Are you ready for that? No, I said honestly. But it doesn't matter. It's done. You could have destroyed them, he said. You still can if they don't follow through. I know, I said, but I'd rather build something than destroy something, even if it's harder. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Guests came up to me one after another, some to apologize for believing the accusations against me, some to praise my generosity, some just curious about the woman who'd kept such enormous secrets. I answered questions until my voice grew hoarse, shook hands until my arm ached, and smiled until my face hurt. Finally, near midnight, Maggie took my arm and guided me toward the exit. Come on, she said. You've done enough for one night. Let's get you home. We walked out of the Riverside Hotel together, my hired car waiting at the curb. I looked back at the grand ballroom one last time, at the lights spilling out onto the dark street. 9 months ago, I'd walked out of that building in shame and despair, thinking my life was over. Tonight I walked out knowing it was just beginning. The first week after the gala was chaos. The story exploded across local news, then regional, then national. Lottery winner secretly saves foundation that betrayed her, ran in newspapers across the country. Cable news shows debated whether I'd been too lenient or admirably compassionate. Social media couldn't decide if I was a hero or a fool. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanted interviews. Charities wanted donations. People I hadn't spoken to in decades suddenly remembered we were friends. I turned off my phone after the second day and let Mr. Morrison handle everything. Paul and Nina made their public apology at a press conference 3 days after the gala. They looked smaller, somehow diminished. Nina's voice shook as she read from a prepared statement. Paul could barely make eye contact with the cameras. They announced their resignations from the board and their commitment to repaying the stolen funds. The internet was merciless. Their social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Their friends distanced themselves. Nina's country club membership was quietly revoked. Paul's business contacts suddenly stopped returning his calls. I watched the press conference from my apartment and felt no satisfaction. Only a deep, weary sadness that it had come to this. "Are you having second thoughts?" Maggie asked. She'd been staying with me since the gala, helping field calls and making sure I ate and slept. "Not about exposing them," I said. "They needed to face consequences. But I keep thinking about how much easier it would have been if they'd just been honest from the start. If they'd admitted they made mistakes and asked for help instead of stealing and lying." "Most people don't have your capacity for forgiveness," Maggie said gently. "I haven't forgiven them yet," I said. "Forgiveness isn't instant. It's something they'll have to earn over time, if they earn it at all." 2 weeks after the gala, Paul and Nina made their first payment to the foundation, $50,000. It was a start. They'd sold Nina's Mercedes and Paul's boat. They had a long way to go, but they were trying. Thomas Reed called with updates every few days. The board had been restructured with 3 new independent members from outside the family. Full financial audits were underway. Maggie had hired an assistant director and was implementing new oversight procedures. Donations, surprisingly, had actually increased. People were inspired by the story of redemption and reform. "We're going to make it," Thomas said during one call. "Clara, you saved us. Not just with money, but by forcing us to become what we always should have been." "How are Paul and Nina doing?" I asked. "Struggling," he said honestly. "They're in therapy, both individual and together. They're working to sell their vacation property. Nina's taken a job, first time she's worked in 20 years. Paul's business is suffering, but he's trying, I think. I think they might actually change. Time will tell." A month after the gala, I received a letter. It came by regular mail, addressed in Nina's handwriting. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. "Dear Clara, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to believe me. But I need to say it anyway. I've spent the last month in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did. It's not an excuse, but I think I need you to know I was jealous of you. You had nothing, no money, no status, no power. But everyone loved you. Everyone respected you. You gave freely and joyfully while I held everything close and tight, always afraid of losing what I had. When you started asking questions about the finances, I panicked. Paul and I had been taking money for so long it felt normal. We told ourselves we deserved it, that we worked hard for the foundation. But we knew it was wrong. We knew you'd expose us if you kept looking. So we struck first. We framed you. We destroyed you, and I told myself it was necessary, that it was your fault for being nosy, that you'd be fine. But you weren't fine, and I wasn't fine either. I haven't been fine for 7 years. I'm trying to be better now. I'm working. I'm in therapy. I'm facing what I've done. Paul is too. We're paying back the money. It'll take 2 years, but we'll do it. We've apologized publicly and privately to everyone we hurt. But I need you to know I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not because you caught us or because you gave us a choice. I'm sorry because I hurt someone who never hurt me. I'm sorry because I let greed and fear turn me into someone I hate. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your mercy changed me. The chance you gave me, the choice between prison and redemption, forced me to look at who I'd become. I didn't like what I saw. I'm trying to become someone better. Someone like you. Thank you for not destroying us when you could have. Thank you for believing we could change even when we didn't believe it ourselves." Nina, I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to forgive yet. But maybe someday. 3 months after the gala, I met Maggie for lunch at our old favorite restaurant. A little Thai place we'd been going to for 20 years. It felt like coming home. "I have news," she said, her eyes sparkling. We just secured 2 new corporate sponsors. The financial audit came back clean, everything's accounted for now. And we're launching 3 new programs next quarter. That's wonderful. I said and meant it. None of it would have been possible without you. She said. Clara, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you that night. I should have defended you. I let fear make me a coward, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I know, I said, and I forgive you. Truly, you owned your mistake. You worked to make it right. That's all anyone can do. As she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. What about you? She asked. What are you going to do now? You've saved the foundation, exposed Paul and Nina, gotten your reputation back. What's next for Clara Jenkins? I smiled. I'm starting my own foundation. The Clara Jenkins Foundation for Elder Advocacy will work on preventing elder abuse, promoting financial literacy for seniors, and supporting people who've been victims of fraud or exploitation. Morrison is helping me set it up. That's perfect, Maggie said. And you're still funding the Hartwell Foundation. For now, I said. As long as they keep their end of the bargain. Thomas sends me quarterly reports. If they stay on track, I'll continue the full 5-year commitment. If they slip back into old patterns, I shrugged. Then I'll redirect the funding to organizations that will use it properly. Do you think they'll make it? Paul and Nina? I don't know, I said honestly. Change is hard. Real change is even harder. But I think they're trying. And that's more than I expected 6 months ago. 6 months after the gala, I received another letter. This one from Paul. Clara, Nina and I have sold the vacation house. The full payment to the foundation will be made next week. All $200,000, ahead of schedule. I won't waste your time with long apologies. You've heard them all. But I wanted you to know this has been the hardest 6 months of my life. I've lost friends, status, respect. My business is struggling. My marriage nearly ended. Nina and I separated for a while, though we're trying again now. But I'm also more honest than I've been in years. I'm in therapy. I'm volunteering at a homeless shelter, actually doing the work instead of just writing checks and taking credit. I'm trying to understand what went wrong inside me that made stealing seem acceptable. You didn't have to give us a chance. You could have let us go to prison. Part of me still thinks that's what we deserved. But you gave us a choice, and in making that choice, you gave us our dignity back. Not the false dignity of status and wealth, but the real kind. The kind that comes from facing what you've done and trying to do better. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying thank you. Thank you for believing we could change. Thank you for caring more about the people we serve than about revenge. Thank you for being the person we should have been all along. Paul, I read his letter sitting in my living room, with late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The lottery ticket, the years of hiding, the humiliation, the planning, the reveal. I thought about revenge and justice, mercy and consequences, forgiveness and accountability. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The hurt was still there, probably always would be. But the rage that had fueled me for months, the burning need to expose and punish, had faded into something softer. Something that felt almost like peace. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Morrison. I want to set up a meeting, I said, with Paul and Nina. Just the 3 of us. No lawyers, no witnesses. I think it's time we talked. Are you sure? He asked. You don't owe them anything, Clara. I know, I said, but I owe myself closure, and maybe they do too. We met a week later at a neutral location, a small conference room at Thomas Reed's law office. Paul and Nina arrived together, both looking older and more worn than they had at the gala. Nina's designer clothes had been replaced with simple, modest dress. Paul had lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. They sat across from me, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Thank you for meeting with us, Nina finally said. We didn't expect. I wanted to tell you something. I interrupted. I've been carrying anger for 6 months. Anger at what you did, at what you took from me, at the pain you caused. And it was justified. You hurt me deeply. They both looked down. But I'm tired of carrying it, I continued. Anger is exhausting. It's heavied. And I've decided I don't want to carry it anymore, so I'm putting it down. Not because you've earned my forgiveness, though you're working toward it. But because I deserve peace. I took a breath. I forgive you. Not all the way, not completely. But enough to move forward. Enough to let go of the need to punish you further. Enough to hope that you really do become better people. And Nina started crying. Quiet tears that she didn't try to hide. Paul's jaw trembled. We don't deserve this, he said hoarsely. No, I agreed. But that's what grace is. Getting what we don't deserve. You gave me humiliation when I deserved respect. I'm giving you a chance when you deserve consequences. Maybe that's how we break the cycle. We'll keep trying, Nina said. To be better. To do better. Not just because you're watching, but because it's right. I know, I said, and surprisingly, I did know. I could see it in their faces, in the way they carried themselves. They were different people than they'd been 6 months ago. Not fully redeemed, but changed. We talked for another hour, really talked, for the first time in our lives. They asked about my plans for the new foundation. I asked about their therapy, their work, their marriage. We didn't become friends. We probably never would. But we became something, 3 people who'd hurt each other, and were trying to move past it. When I left the meeting, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. 1 year after the gala, the Hartwell Family Foundation held another annual event. This time, I attended as myself, Clara Jenkins, donor and founder, not Grace Chen or the mysterious phantom philanthropist. The ballroom was full again, but the atmosphere was different. More genuine, less showy. The decorations were elegant but not excessive. The focus was on the work, not the status. Paul and Nina weren't there. They'd served their year of penance and chosen to step away completely, letting new leadership take over. I'd received a card from them, simple, heartfelt, wishing the foundation well. Thomas Reed gave the welcome speech, talking about transparency and accountability and second chances. Maggie presented the year's accomplishments, programs expanded, lives changed, communities served. The foundation was thriving. When it was time for the donor recognition, they called me to the stage. Clara Jenkins, Thomas said, his voice warm, exemplifies everything this foundation should be about. She gave not just her money, but her time, her heart, and ultimately her mercy. She could have destroyed us when we failed her. Instead, she saved us and demanded we become better. Clara, would you like to say a few words? I stood at the microphone looking out at 300 faces. Some familiar, some new, all watching with respect instead of pity. A year ago, I said, I stood on this stage and made a choice. I chose mercy over revenge, redemption over destruction, hope over bitterness. It wasn't easy. Some days I wanted to watch everything burn. But I'm glad I didn't, because look at what we built instead. I gestured to the screens behind me, showing photos of the people the foundation had helped, children fed, veterans housed, families supported. This is what matters, I said, not pride, not status, not revenge. This, the work, the people we serve. Everything else is just noise. The applause was thunderous, genuine. After I stepped down, people came up one after another, thanking me, hugging me, telling me their stories. I listened to each one, really listened, the way I'd always tried to do. Late in the evening, as the event was winding down, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for everything. You changed our lives. Nina and Paul. I looked at it for a long moment, then typed back, you're welcome. Keep changing. I slipped my phone back in my purse and walked out of the ballroom with Maggie. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, Paul and Nina were rebuilding their lives. The foundation was thriving. People were being helped. And I was finally, genuinely at peace. You know what the best part is? Maggie said as we walked to our cars. What? You don't have to hide anymore. No more secrets, no more pretending. You're just you, wealthy, generous, kind, and finally appreciated for who you really are. She was right. For 3 years I'd hidden my lottery winnings. For 6 months I'd hidden my identity as the phantom philanthropist. But now I could just be Clara Jenkins. No masks, no pretense, no shame. I'd won the lottery twice, really. Once with money, and once with something more valuable. The chance to discover who I really was and what I was really made of when everything was stripped away. I'd been humiliated, betrayed, and hurt. But I'd also been merciful, strategic, and strong. I'd learned that revenge was easy and grace was hard. That forgiveness wasn't weakness but courage. That justice and mercy could coexist if you were brave enough to demand both. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From that lottery ticket to this moment, it had been painful and difficult and complicated. But I wouldn't change a thing. I'd found my purpose. I'd kept my integrity. I'd given people, including myself, second chances. And I'd learned the most important lesson of all. The greatest wealth isn't what you have in your bank account. It's who you become when tested, and what you choose to do with the power you're given. I chose mercy. I chose justice. I chose peace. And that, I realized as I pulled into my driveway, was the real jackpot.